Hello again, everybody. My name is Tim Hartleben, and this is my current events presentation for the Commonwealth of Australia. First, I'd like to go over a topic that discusses gender breakdown in Parliament. This article was released about 2 weeks ago, and it reads that Australia beats UK, US, Canada in female representation. Overall, women form 38% of the federal parliament, but breaking it down between the two houses reveals a discrepancy. While women make up only 31% of the 151-member House of Representatives, they're the majority in the 76-member Senate at 53%, which puts Australia ahead of Canada in the US in terms of female representation in the upper house. Labor is largely responsible for the improved representation of women in the lower house, with the party nearing parity at 43%. The lag is apparent on the Conservative side, however, with the Liberals at 21% and the Nationals having just two female members of Parliament in the lower house, and that would be Anne Webster and Michelle Landry. Three of the four main parties, Labor, the Greens, and the Nationals, boast majority female representation in the upper house, leaving the Liberal Party in the lone corner with female senators in the minority. Women across the two parties were more likely to be placed in marginal seats than men. Female members of Parliament represented at 55% of the Labour's marginal seats and at 35% of the Liberal marginal seats. There we go. All right. While looking at gender breakdowns in Parliament, it is important to understand the professional demographics regarding the backgrounds of the members of Parliament to assess whether perceptions of privileged pathways to Parliament were accurate. So ultimately they want to track to see if these members of Parliament actually have the education and the ability to properly represent people in Parliament, rather than, okay, I know somebody, so this is my seat. The data packs few surprises, with the Liberals overrepresented by members of Parliament with law and finance backgrounds, and Labour with union backgrounds. The Greens take care when it comes to the proportion of members with science backgrounds. 55% of Liberal members of Parliament possessed a finance and business background and 49% had a law background. Labour also had a high proportion of members of Parliament with a law background and at 38%, and over-indexed compared with other parties in education and party official unions, equated to about another 38%. Interestingly enough, few politicians actually have a background in political science or public policy. Compared to our Five Eyes allies, New Zealand, the UK, the US, and Canada, Australia is second only to New Zealand in terms of overall female representation in federal parliament. Of the three countries with the Senate, Australia, Canada, and the United States, Australia outperforms with 53% female representation, compared with Canada at 49% and the US at 24%. It wouldn't be a current events presentation without discussing COVID, as it has affected virtually the entire world at this point. So this next topic was posted about 4 hours ago. Australia had a deadline. That deadline was not met. Australia has fallen 4.3 million doses short of its target of delivering 4 million COVID vaccines by March 31st, prompting criticism of the government. The 85% shortfall comes 2 days after Brisbane entered another snap lockdown to combat a small outbreak. Last week, the government said the vaccine rollout did not demand urgency given Australia's low infection rates. The country has reported 909 deaths and 29,300 cases since the pandemic began, far fewer than many other nations. But sporadic outbreaks have led to 6 lockdowns in cities in recent months. Critics say situations like Brisbane's outbreak show why a quick vaccine program is still needed. Brisbane's 2 clusters have been linked to a nurse and a doctor who contracted the virus from a COVID ward at the same hospital. It is unclear why those health workers have not been yet vaccinated. Critics have accused the government of mishandling the rollout, which began on 22 February, which was much later than many other countries. Australia is administering the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines and has a rate of 2.3 vaccines per 100 people. That is expected to increase in coming months as vaccine access is opened up to the wider population. All right, here we go. Natural disasters such as the massive floods in eastern Australia last week have also disrupted the rollout. Earlier this month, the EU blocked a shipment of AstraZeneca doses to Australia, arguing there was greater need for them in Europe. Australia said that one shipment of 250,000 doses would not greatly affect its own program as it built up its own manufacturing capability. However, Australia has asked the EU to review the ban on its order, which Prime Minister Morrison said has already been paid for. Labor opposition leader Anthony Albanese said the government, by its own admission, could not blame international supply issues. So what's happening here is there seems to be a major miscommunication with not only the internal government, but the vaccine manufacturing and the EU as a whole. Queensland's capital reported 2 more community transmission cases on Wednesday, bringing the outbreak to 15 infections in total. There are fears that the city's 3-day lockdown, due to finish on Thursday, will need to be extended. Contract tracers are scrambling to track down infected people and have so far placed more than 1,000 people in close quarantine lockdown. Basically, they have to stay inside their homes. This lockdown has forced many in Queensland and interstate to cancel their Easter and school holiday plans. Queensland's state economy is heavily reliant on tourism, and operators have forecast that the 3-day lockdown has already costed a 35 million Australian dollar loss, which is about 26 million in US dollars. All right. We're all aware of the tragic wildfires that pretty much swept over most of Australia back in 2020. The fires may not have spread across the entire country, but the impacts did. The wildfires did not just devastate the life and land directly in their paths. Smoke from the draves drifted as far as New Zealand, which was 1,200 miles away, and poor air quality affected an estimated 11.3 million Australians. In the capital city, air quality deteriorated to 38 times the hazardous level. At this time, the air quality was the worst in the world. A number of politicians, including the former leader of the National Party, Barnaby Joyce, suggested that Australia's recent wildfires were intensified by a concerted reduction in the number of controlled burns conducted in national parks and bushlands as a result of environmental lobbying. Controlled burning involves setting planned fires to rid the forest of dead trees, tree limbs, and other natural debris that acts as fuel for fires in order to prevent a destructive wildfire in the future. These controlled burns can only be scheduled for a period when they will not pose a threat to the public. All right, so next brings me to how the public responded to Prime Minister Morrison's acts during these wildfires. If you followed Australian politics, you would have quickly learned that Prime Minister Morrison left the country to go on holiday with his family in Hawaii right in the middle of these wildfires. Morrison said that the fires had made his government think a little harder on how to produce comfort and consolation to the victims. His return was met with fury by residents in the fire-ravaged towns of Cobargo in the state of New South Wales earlier this month. The embarrassed Prime Minister could do nothing but get back in his car and drive away. And if you are interested, the New York Times has released a documentary on these Australian wildfires very recently that actually shows the true interaction of Scott Morrison and the citizens in some of these cities, and it's you'll be surprised. These citizens did not roll over. They stood their ground. They mocked him. They cursed him, and it was very true to see. And what I'd like to do next is a buddy of mine named Matthew Nolan is actually an Australian native of Brisbane, and I asked him to provide a little bit of his opinion on Prime Minister Morrison. So we're going to jump right into that. Bear with me.
Hey Tim, sorry it's taken so long to get back to you. I had a hectic work schedule, but You asked me for my interpretation of Scott Morrison's speech about the bushfires in New South Wales. Well, he did a couple speeches. The first one was where he apologised for being away, and the second one was where he basically thanked firefighters, premiers, and everyone else for doing his job for him while he was away on a family holiday. I don't like the man. I've never liked him, and he is just out of touch with the regular Australian person. You can see that by the way he carries himself in interviews, the awkwardness he does, the forced handshakes. If you watch some of the footage from where he visited the bushfire towns, you'll see what I mean. He is just completely out of touch with the Australian person. It's really sad that he is our Prime Minister.
All right, and there you have it. Thank you, Matt, for that. Here I have a few photos of the public's response. When news first broke that Prime Minister Morrison had left the country, there were many protests regarding this decision. Not only protests him leaving, but there was nothing happening. All you had was civil servants and firefighters, thank God, fighting for these families, for their homes. Ultimately, the fire took its toll, and this middle picture here is actually a Aboriginal woman who, I believe this was in Cobargo. She is refusing to shake the Prime Minister's hand due to his actions. Lastly, we have the image here in Sydney. Basically, the citizens wanted to pay a tribute to these service members who were putting their lives on the line in order to attempt for them to gain some solemnity here. Anyways, I thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. But as I previously stated, if you are interested in that little documentary that the New York Times made, please go watch it. Thank you.